So today's guest is my old friend and colleague, Yvonne Simons. I knew her as an education reporter at WREL 2 decades ago, but since that time, her star has risen. She has been in news management for the better part of 2 decades and is currently the news director at KATU in Portland, Oregon, where there is no shortage of news to cover. Now, she's also a classically trained singer, a cat lover, and a devoted daughter to her 93-year-old mother. But most of all, Yvonne is a kind person and a deep thinker, exactly the kind of guest I like to have on my show. Yvonne, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Amanda.
So I always say with all of my guests, and I've found this to be true, that nobody has a linear life. We all kind of go down these circuitous paths, right?
Right.
So you are really the perfect example of that. And we've had a little time to visit this week, so I've heard a lot more than I ever knew about your background. But talk to my audience about where you grew up and kind of what your dreams and aspirations were when you first started out in your first career.
Wow. I grew up in what was then a rural part of suburban Detroit. I grew up around kids with horses and cows and things like that. It's more suburbia now. But I had big dreams. My parents said, hey, we're poor. If you want to go to college, be smart and get a scholarship. And I really took that to heart.
It's a lot of pressure.
For like a 10-year-old, but, give me a goal. And so I thought I fell in love with musical theater when I was a child and did all the music classes. We had an excellent program in my high school, and I went to college at Eastern Michigan University as a music ed major. And the ed was the fallback because I was going to go to Broadway.
Of course you were.
Yeah. There was no plan, but I was going to do that.
But that was the logical next step, right?
And in my first voice lesson, my teacher just said, "Oh, honey, is there anything else you can do?" And I learned that I wasn't that good.
Oh, that's not true. Maybe you just weren't Broadway good.
I wasn't Broadway good,
Yeah.
but I was. I had some things to unwind, and I was for the first 2 years. It was kind of painful, and I started to think maybe I need to turn left. But things started to click together, and I did graduate with that degree, and so I decided to teach in rural Georgia.
Of course you did.
Because why not? I was ready for an adventure. I think I told you that when I was 14 years old, I was a Girl Scout. And a lot of people go, it's kind of old to be a Girl Scout. But we did it because camping was free and cheap. And so there was a bunch of friends. But I had an opportunity to go to a property the Scouts no longer owned, but it was called National Center West in Wyoming, next to Grand Teton National Park. And I was 14 years old, and in this thing, they would put like 9 girls together and teach us how to read maps and compasses and say, see you later for a week. As you can imagine, the liability now, they don't do that. But it was so empowering that it doesn't really occur to me to be afraid to take risks. That was a really pivotal thing.
It was a formative event in your life.
Yeah.
Which is really great.
I'm not afraid to travel by myself and to go to places that are unfamiliar, which is good for journalists.
You go as a middle school teacher to rural Georgia. You're teaching English, is that right?
At first, I just taught music to middle school and high school, and then I went to a different school where I taught everything, including English. And my students, I love the students, but I got really frustrated with public education and using our resources. My kids had a real hard time. We'd work a long time on sentences, and then you moved to paragraphs, and they'd forget how to write the sentences. But I would be out in the hallway on break time, and I would hear them recite dialogue from a sitcom they saw the night before perfectly, because I'd seen it too, and I go, how come they can remember that, but they can't remember what
you're
we're
teaching
doing in
them?
the classroom?
It was frustrating.
And I thought there must be something about television. And so I didn't really want to do what I was doing, and I decided to go to grad school. And I was thinking, I'll learn about television and bring it back in the classroom. But after a semester hanging out with those mass comm students who were doing all the cool, I went, they're having a lot more fun than I am.
It sounds like a great job.
So I kicked over to the mass comm program.
And became a television journalist.
I did.
And when I met you, you were at REL. That would have been in the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had gone to a couple stations before you got there.
Started in Champaign, Illinois, and then went to Norfolk, Virginia, and was in Norfolk for 7 years. I was at REL for 8 years.
But were you always concentrating on education, or did that come later?
I started as a business and labor reporter.
Oh, okay.
In this countryside of Illinois, it's manufacturing, and I liked that and learning about how unions were kind of falling apart then. It was very interesting. But when I got to Norfolk, it was a right to work state. They didn't really have a lot of unions. And my news director said, gee, you were a teacher. How about education? And I ended up doing that for most of the 20 years I was a reporter.
And it was a good fit.
It was.
So you, at one point, you said, I'm going to go do a fellowship. I'm going to leave the industry. So again, pivot.
Well, I wasn't trying to leave the industry. I was trying to do more. I think I was a decent reporter at WREL for education, but it was hard to get opportunities to do other things. They liked what I was doing, and I wanted a bigger life. So friends told me, apply for this fellowship, and I did, and I got it. And it was a pivot. I was exposed to all different kinds of journalists who are on individual but the same journey that I was, and trying big things. And I panicked a little bit. I don't have a job to go back to when this is over. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I freelanced a little bit. I thought I would love that. I worked, paid my bills, but I was scared every day. And I went, I don't think this is me. And so I ran back to traditional broadcast journalism in Columbus to anchor for a while. And I thought, I'm finally a Monday through Friday anchor. I'm going to love this.
A consistent job, consistent schedule.
And an elevated prestige. Or an
Sure.
anchor maybe. Hated it.
It wasn't, again, left turn, hard left.
I was so surprised.
Yeah.
That was maybe the biggest professional surprise of my life. This thing I'd pined for and finally got, I hated. And then a friend called me and said, come be my assistant news director in Las Vegas. And I went, oh, cool. I don't know how to do that, right? I just need an adult in the room, please come. And I did.
So what year was that?
2004 or 5.
So, I interviewed our former boss, Nancy Popkin, for this show. And one of the things she talked about in the 90s when she was an assistant news director was there weren't a lot of women in these positions. And there definitely, I'm sure, weren't a lot of women of color. And so you were kind of paving a road that was not necessarily, you didn't necessarily have other people before you paving it in terms of elevating to the positions that you eventually got.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that at the time, if I'm being honest. We had a news director at WREL who was African American,
Right.
and she was
Yes.
very supportive, is still a mentor of mine today. And so I wasn't thinking these things weren't possible. And so I was just doing it.
I mean, that's part of your personality. You've always just thought, okay, let's try this. It's possible. So you go to Vegas, you start in management, you get this training, and that led you eventually to become a news director.
Yeah, in Boise, Idaho.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Where I asked the recruiter, Boise, a lot of my friends.
Can you find it on the map?
Yeah, a lot of my friends would go, oh, are you worried about that flooding? No, it's in Iowa.
Yeah.
I'm in Idaho.
Yeah.
I just said, well, okay, it's state capital. I understand how to do that news. Would I be the only black person in the state? And they said, well, maybe.
Oh, wow. Okay. So stand out.
Whenever I'd see another person of color, we'd start laughing because we would know we're not
I grew up outside of Philadelphia, but I lived in Maine, Portland, Maine. And I always knew my gate in the airport because it was very white people. And they were very white. They didn't have a lot they didn't have a lot of sun, right? So I'd be like, oh, this is my gate to Portland. So yes, that's probably not a stereotype, probably true.
People were very friendly to me there, though.
You liked it there.
I did.
Yeah.
I enjoyed my life there. And I was invited into a group of women. There were these 3 women, the vice president of Key Bank, the provost of Boise State University, and the publisher of the newspaper, who said, come, join our little group. And we never talked about work, or rarely, It was about getting off the hamster wheel and just being women who were managers who had a certain sensibility, and it grew me up. Sounds odd for someone who is already in their 40s, mid 40s, but I really enjoyed the nurturing I got as a female leader there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that, especially for me starting my own business. I have met so many women that are like, what can I do to help? And uplifting me and giving me lots of advice, which is really nice.
I think it's really important, especially if you're going to embark on pivots. That's a lonely road if you don't find help.
Some mentors, absolutely. So you eventually end up in Portland, Oregon, as the news director, where you are now. You've been there 7 years, is that right?
Almost six. Almost
Okay.
six.
And this is a big news city. I mean, this isn't just, there's a lot going on in Portland.
All the time. There are no slow news days in Portland, Oregon. We've had, when George Floyd died, we had 100 straight days of riots in a part of downtown. I know in the national media it looked like the city was on fire, the whole city, but it was a smaller area, but still, it captured the city and really kind of held us in a vice for a while. And we did a lot of stories about whether the government, whether the city, the state, or the federal government, as Trump was threatening to bring in the National Guard to knock that down. And
Yeah, it was a national story.
It was a national story, and we were in the middle of it. My reporters were attacked just for being reporters, and it wasn't people protesting about George Floyd after the first couple of days. It was really Proud Boys, Antifa, and unaffiliated anarchists just trying to create a lot of trouble. But the fact that the city let that go on for 3 months was really disheartening.
And then you had, well, you still do have a problem of people who are unhoused. There's a drug problem. So there's a constant kind of, there's a constant story there that you guys are covering and are responsible for.
And I asked my anchors to lead the way on that. And so they really do the depth reporting on crime and justice, on the homelessness issues, on just how the city functions or doesn't function in a franchise we call City in Crisis. I have another anchor, though, who also works on City in Crisis solutions, because there are members of the community who are rising up to try and save a city that is really beloved. For all the challenges that Portland has, it's a wonderful city. It's a vibrant city. It's just we're going through some real growth pains, and really growth has driven all this. We grew rapidly, and I think the government just didn't keep up.
So going from being a talent, an on-air person in an industry, to now leading a newsroom and being in leadership for almost 20 years. I mean, what is that shift like? Because now you have a lot on your shoulders, right? You have a lot on your plate.
It can be overwhelming. I think that I'm just starting to learn where to put the guardrails so that it's not 24/7. And you and I both know news directors who just can never get off the hamster wheel, and you burn out because the job is only getting harder. We have fewer people to do what we used to do with a lot of people, and we owe viewers a lot, and they're expecting a lot more out of us than they used to, because if you don't bring them valuable information that's useful to their lives, they're not going to watch, and they're not watching in record numbers. So I believe,
it's a challenge.
Yeah, and I believe it's a challenge that our democracy rests on, even at the local level. And so we all have to get better at our jobs, especially the leaders in broadcast and digital.
Did you think, would you have ever imagined at 10 years old, the little girl with the big dreams, right, in the Midwest, would you have ever imagined that you would be a news director at a TV station, kind of leading the way in this big time city, this big time news city? I mean, could you have pictured that?
No. No, I mean, like I was still the little girl who wanted to be the unsinkable Molly Brown on Broadway, you know, some days I still do. No, I mean, although I was a little kid with big dreams, I didn't know news directors and newsrooms kind of existed.
Sure, sure.
But I have had a lot of confidence, and this job challenges your confidence all the time. You're dealing with people. It's really a people job, not just the viewers, but your staff and our our employee base is changing and what they expect from work, and you can't be the baby boomer who says, "No, in my day we
Right. You
did
have
10
to
stories a
evolve.
day." Yeah, you tell them those stories, they'll just leave and go home for the day. You have to. So we're constantly looking at the human element and how do you get them to want to do this very important job.
Right. How do you tap into that potential that they have? So this podcast is about transformation. Clearly, you have done that over and over and over. Unfortunately, our culture doesn't always see women of a certain age as being relevant, as being contributors, as being people that have something to offer. And people feel stuck. A lot of women feel unseen, they feel isolated, they feel unheard, and it's very hard for them to figure out what that next chapter is. So, as someone who has continually done this throughout her life and continues to do it, I mean, you're not done;
Yeah.
you're still going.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to other women that are feeling that and feel like they need some oomph, they need something to get them to that next level?
I think that it's important to know your why. Why do you want to do something? Okay, and do you have the skill set? Do you need to learn the skill set? You got to break it down to, I mean, I think in just taking leaps without knowledge is really dangerous. And it's dangerous to men too of a certain age. I think that our culture is youth centered, and I, I shared with you I have some opportunities in front of me, and one of the things I worry about is like don't go too far afield and leap. And because if it doesn't work out, would I ever get another job again? I'm 66 years old. I feel like I'm 35 years old,
Well,
but
you have the energy of a 35-year-old.
but society does not
Not see it that way.
doesn't see it
Right.
that way. And I have a younger brother who his job was dissolved. He's 63, and he said, "I can't find a job." So I think it's harder for women, but it is an
Also
ageism
hard.
in our culture that makes. So I think you have to do a certain level of homework so that you
Sure.
know what you're about to jump into. And then we talked about it earlier. You need partners. Even if you're going it alone, you need partners who've been there, who are doing it, who will save you so much time and so much money
Sure.
and so much angst by giving you guideposts.
Tools. Yeah, I have a lot of mentors in the podcast space, actually. One woman and a couple of men, and they have given me great advice and feedback on just everything from editing to marketing to social media. That if I didn't have that feedback, it would take me 10 times longer to do everything.
I have 4 women and 1 man that I added, a former boss of mine a couple of years ago. Been crucial about, and still now I can jump on the email or pick up the phone and go like, is this stupid? I would
Should I
think,
be
you know,
considering
is
this?
this, you
Yeah.
know, or and they were instrumental when I made a really bad career decision and action when I was in Charlotte. And I thought I had ended my career. I treated an employee very badly, couldn't seem to pull myself back when in the moment, and I I was put on a last chance agreement. I mean, I thought I had blown my career up.
But you learned something from
I
it.
did learn something from it, and that mentor group kept their job at that point was actually just to keep my head on. And my brother was actually part of that group to say, "Hey, here's what you're missing." And he just happened to be a life coach, and he was able to help me understand what I needed to change. And then an agent helped kind of shop me quickly into what was to become the best job of my life at the CBS O&O in Sacramento at the time. I mean, I think the job I have now is the best job.
But at that time,
At the
you
time.
were really lucky to get through that, right?
Yeah, it crushed my soul that I crushed someone else's soul at a really critical time in their life, and I've been forever sorry. But you learn from those things, and things don't have to be fatal unless you don't. As long as you learn what was wrong and figure out how to not do that again.
Right. We learn from our mistakes.
We do. We hope
don't.
we can.
Yeah, from success, we don't really learn anything other than, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that vein of success, what else is on your bucket list? Doesn't have to be professional, it can be personal. What else would you like to do?
I've never been married.
Okay.
And it's not because I didn't want to be. I think I was busy.
Yeah, I think you've been pretty busy. You really haven't had a lot of time.
I'd like to find someone, but it's so my friends tell me I scare men, so I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
see that.
Amanda goes, yeah, you
Intense.
do.
Yeah, a little tough, but but hey, if somebody wants a beautiful woman with a great singing voice and lots of wisdom, I mean, you're available.
I can be fun.
Listen, YouTube, she's available. She's here, Yvonne. I'll get you in touch with her. I mean, and obviously you've done so much, but I do think that we all have these kind of like, oh, well, someday maybe I'll do this or I'll do that. And they're little things and they're big things, right? There's a lot of things.
I was lucky when I was a reporter. I had a side gig, a paying side gig as a classical singer. I was singing in ensembles and in courses that performed with the North Carolina Symphony and the Virginia Symphony. And that was really, really fun. And I don't have time for that. But maybe, when I retire, I try not to let my voice go totally to seed. I practice in the shower, like every morning.
You've been staying with me, and I actually heard you the other day. It was very nice. But, I'll share one quick personal thing, and that was when my mom was dying. You came to visit me, and she had a brain tumor, and she was in my home, and she loved music. We had a piano, and you sang for her.
Yeah.
And I know that was really moving. Well, it was moving to her, and it was definitely moving to me as a friend. So.
And I remember that day clearly, and your mom has been, I know for you, a great mentor. She was for me. I mean, I didn't know her that long, but we had some great conversations, and I just admire when women share, because not all women do. So women out there, we can't be holding on to the keys of the kingdom. If we want women to get somewhere, we have to share what we know, and then all boats will rise. It isn't me over you. Everybody can have their time to shine. I'm having a moment with my current company. They like me, and that's empowering. But there are not enough women in our industry. There are not enough women in the industry that is developing because broadcast is changing a lot. And we've all got to manage that together, or we'll be left out.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that we all have to share what we know. And that's what this podcast is about. I can't tell you how much I've learned from all of the women that have been on the show and continue to learning from you. And for me, when I think about my next chapter, it couldn't be any better to be in a position of talking to other women who have gone before me and get their feedback. So thank you so much for being on my show.
Fun, Amanda.
How can people follow you? I guess they can follow your station.
My station is KATU.com. We call it KATU, but it's the 4 letters. And we have a great website. We're #1 in digital. Yeah.
And I'm sure you're on LinkedIn too.
I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay. So if anybody wants to get in touch, if a marriage proposal comes your way, I mean,
I'll give you credit.
Give me credit. Please give credit where credit is due. So anyway, Yvonne, you're lovely inside and out. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for asking me.